5 years. That's how long Sabrina played the role of the dutiful, invisible housewife. She scrubbed floors while her husband, Leon, built an empire. She wore thrift store cardigans while he bought Italian silk suits. Everyone laughed at her. They called her the Mouse. They whispered that Leon Bennett, the tech genius of the century, was dragged down by his plain, poverty-stricken wife. When Leon finally handed her the divorce papers on their anniversary to marry his glamorous mistress, he thought he was cutting off dead weight. He thought he had won. He didn't know that the woman he was discarding wasn't Sabrina the orphan. She was Lady Seraphina of the House of Sterling, the sole heiress to the oldest fortune in Europe. And she wasn't losing a husband. She was about to destroy one. The silence in the penthouse on East 65th Street was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a scream, but in the Bennett household, screams were rare. Leon Bennett didn't scream. He negotiated. He optimized. And tonight, he was optimizing his life by removing the one variable that no longer fit his algorithm: his wife. Sabrina Bennett sat on the edge of the sprawling velvet sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple grey wool dress, the kind that frayed slightly at the cuffs. It was clean, practical, and utterly invisible against the stark, modern luxury of the apartment. Across from her, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the glittering Manhattan skyline, stood Leon. He was swirling a glass of 1942 scotch, the amber liquid catching the city lights. He looked like a titan, 6'2", jawline sharp enough to cut glass, wearing a bespoke suit from Savile Row that cost more than Sabrina's entire wardrobe for the last decade. "You're not listening, Sabrina," Leon said, his voice smooth, devoid of affection. He didn't turn to look at her. "This isn't about cruelty. It's about evolution. Nexus Dynamics is going public next month. I'm going to be ringing the bell at the NYSE. I need a partner who can stand next to me, not behind me." Sabrina's expression didn't change. Her blue eyes, usually warm, were unreadable. "I've stood beside you for 5 years, Leon, when you were coding in a basement in Queens, when we ate instant noodles because we couldn't afford electricity. I was there." Leon turned then, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "And I appreciate that. I do. That's why the settlement is generous. You'll get the apartment in Jersey. You'll get a stipend. You can go back to whatever it is you do. Knitting? Library work?" He checked his Patek Philippe watch. He was bored. He was managing a transaction. "It's Jenna, isn't it?" Sabrina asked softly. Leon paused. The air in the room grew heavy. Jenna Vane, the daughter of oil tycoon Marcus Vane. She was 25, a graduate of the Sorbonne, and currently the head of public relations at Leon's company. She was everything Sabrina wasn't: loud, expensive, and terrified of nothing. "Jenna understands the world I live in now," Leon said, his voice hardening. "She opens doors, Sabrina. Her last name alone adds 50 million to my valuation. You? You're a liability. The board asks about you. They ask why the wife of a billionaire dresses like she shops at a garage sale. It's embarrassing." Sabrina stood up slowly. She walked over to the coffee table where the divorce papers lay, thick and heavy in a blue folder. "Liability," she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. What Leon didn't know, what he had never bothered to ask in 5 years because he was too busy talking about himself, was where Sabrina went on those long Tuesdays when she said she was volunteering. She wasn't volunteering. She was managing the Sterling Trust. Sabrina wasn't just Sabrina Bennett. She was Lady Seraphina Caldwell Sterling, the granddaughter of the Duke of Ethelgard. Her family didn't just have money, they had history. They owned the land the bank that lent Leon his startup capital was built on. She had run away from the suffocating pressure of the royal court to find something real, something earned. She thought she found it in Leon. She thought his ambition was passion. She realized now it was just hunger. "If I sign these," Sabrina said, her voice steady, "there is no going back, Leon. You understand that? Once I leave this room, the Sabrina you know ceases to exist." Leon chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That's the point, Sabrina. I've outgrown you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Jenna is waiting for me at the Pierre. We're celebrating the IPO launch tonight." Sabrina looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the greed in his eyes, the arrogance that had replaced the spark of genius she once loved. "Okay," she whispered. She picked up the Mont Blanc pen lying on the table. "Just like that?" Leon seemed surprised by her lack of a fight. He expected tears, begging. "Just like that," Sabrina said. She signed her name with a flourish, not the shaky scrawl of a nervous housewife, but the sharp, commanding signature of a woman who had signed treaties. Sabrina Bennett. She placed the pen down. "Enjoy the party, Leon. I'll pack my things." Leon grabbed the folder, checking the signature, relief washing over him. "You're doing the right thing. You were never built for this life, Sabrina. You're too soft." He walked out the door without looking back. Sabrina waited until the elevator doors dinged and slid shut. Then she walked to the window where he had just stood. She pulled a small, outdated flip phone from her pocket, a burner she kept for emergencies. She dialed a number. It rang once. "It's done," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the timid wobble she used around Leon. It became regal, cold. "Very good, Your Grace." A crisp British voice answered on the other end. It was Reginald Thorne, the royal solicitor. "Shall we initiate the protocols?" "Not yet," Sabrina said, watching Leon's limousine pull away from the curb 40 stories down. "He wants to celebrate his IPO. Let him. He wants to show off Jenna Vane to the world. Let him. I want him to climb as high as possible, Reginald. And then, Mom?" "And then," Sabrina's eyes narrowed, "I want to remind him who actually owns the ladder." 3 days later, Sabrina was moving the last of her boxes into the generous settlement apartment in Jersey. It was a 2-bedroom walk-up with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. It was a far cry from the penthouse, but Sabrina didn't mind the location. She minded the disrespect. Leon hadn't just divorced her. He had erased her. He had already scrubbed her photos from his social media. The tabloids were running stories about Leon Bennett's secret romance with heiress Jenna Vane, painting Leon as a long-suffering genius who had finally found his equal. Sabrina was described as a childhood mistake. While Sabrina unpacked her kettle, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Daily Mail. Breaking: Leon Bennett and Jenna Vane to host the gala of the century to celebrate Nexus Dynamics IPO. Rumors of a wedding announcement. Sabrina stared at the screen. The gala was this Saturday, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was the event of the season. There was a knock on the door, not the polite knock of a neighbor, but a firm, authoritative rap. Sabrina opened it to reveal a man in a dark suit holding a briefcase. He looked out of place in the dingy hallway. "Mr. Thorne," Sabrina sighed, stepping back to let him in. Reginald Thorne, a man who had served the Sterling family for 40 years, stepped into the small apartment and looked around with barely concealed horror. He dusted off a wooden chair before sitting. "Your Grace," Thorne said, "your father is displeased. "My father is always displeased, Reggie," Sabrina said, pouring him a cup of tea from her cheap kettle. "Let me guess. He wants me to come home to Ethelgard. Put on a tiara, marry a duke, and forget I ever played house in New York." "He wants to protect you," Thorne corrected. "This man. Bennett. He is using the Vane family connections to secure his European distribution rights. He is leveraging assets he does not have. He is building his castle on sand." Sabrina sat opposite him. "I know. He forged my signature on the initial collateral loan 5 years ago. He didn't think I knew. He thought the money came from an angel investor." Thorne's eyes widened. "He forged—" "Your Grace, that is fraud. We can have him arrested within the hour." "No," Sabrina said sharply. "Prison is too easy. He thinks I'm poor. He thinks I'm soft. He thinks the Vanes are the pinnacle of wealth." Sabrina stood up and walked to the closet. She pushed aside the drab grey wool dresses and pulled out a garment bag that had been hidden in the back. She unzipped it just an inch, revealing a shimmer of fabric that cost more than the entire building they were standing in. It was a custom gown from the royal vaults. "I'm going to that gala, Reggie." Thorne hesitated. "You weren't invited, Ma'am. The security list is managed by Jenna Vane, personally. She has blacklisted you." Sabrina smiled, a terrifyingly cold smile. "She blacklisted Sabrina Bennett. She didn't blacklist the Grand Duchess of Ethelgard. In fact, I believe the Metropolitan Museum received a very generous anonymous donation yesterday on the condition that a certain VIP guest be accommodated." Thorne sighed, a small smile tugging at his lips. $10 million. The museum director nearly fainted. He has reserved the royal table for you." "Good," Sabrina said. "Then we have work to do. I need the seal, Reggie, and I need the entourage." "The entourage?" Thorne raised an eyebrow. "You mean the royal guard?" "I mean everyone," Sabrina said. "If Leon wants a show, I'm going to give him a production. He wants to marry Jenna Vane. He needs to divorce me first, and he thinks signing those papers in the living room was the end of it. Wasn't it?" "Technically," Sabrina said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Under the laws of Ethelgard, a marriage involving a royal heir isn't dissolved until it is annulled by the sovereign, or until the spouse publicly renounces their claim in front of the crown's witness." "You want him to renounce you publicly?" "I want him to do it while holding Jenna Vane's hand," Sabrina said. "I want him to choose, explicitly, irrevocably, in front of the cameras. I want the world to see him trade a diamond for a piece of glass." Sabrina walked to the window, looking out at the brick wall, but seeing the Met Gala red carpet. "Call the stylist, Reggie, and tell my father. Tell him his daughter is finally coming home. But first, she has to take out the trash." The transition from Sabrina Bennett, the invisible housewife from Queens, back to Lady Seraphina. Sterling didn't happen in the dingy Jersey apartment. It happened in the presidential suite of the Mark Hotel on the Upper East Side, a space larger than the entire floor of the building Leon had banished her to. Reginald Thorne had mobilized the entourage with military precision. When Sabrina arrived at the hotel via a service entrance to avoid the paparazzi already swarming the city for the gala, the suite was already a hive of activity. There was Giovanni, a stylist who usually only worked with Oscar nominees and actual queens, actively steaming a garment bag that looked heavy enough to contain a body. There were 2 armed guards at the door, ex-SAS soldiers whose stony expressions made Leon's hired security look like mall cops. And there was the jeweler, Mr. Dubois, a man representing the oldest jewelry house in Paris, stood next to an open armored briefcase on the mahogany dining table. Inside rested the Ethelgard Tears, a necklace of sapphires the size of quail eggs, surrounded by flawless white diamonds. It hadn't been worn in public since Sabrina's grandmother wore it to the coronation of Elizabeth II. "Your Grace," Giovanni said, bowing deeply as she entered. "We have 4 hours. It is barely enough time to undo 5 years of neglect." He wasn't trying to be cruel. He was being professional. Sabrina looked in the foyer mirror. She saw the grey wool dress, the hair pulled back in a severe, sensible bun, the posture of someone used to shrinking so others could feel big. "Burn it," Sabrina said, pulling the elastic band from her hair and letting it fall around her shoulders. "Burn all of it." The transformation was agonizing. It was a physical scrubbing away of the woman Leon had taken for granted. Her hair, usually dull and limp, was treated until it shone like spun gold, styled into soft, cascading waves that framed her face. Her makeup was applied not to hide her features, but to weaponize them. A smoky eye that made her blue irises look like ice, and a deep crimson lip that was a warning sign. Then came the dress. It wasn't just a dress. It was architectural warfare. It was a custom Alexander McQueen made of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light around it. It was strapless, with a corseted bodice that cinched her waist, impossibly tight, flowing into a train that rippled like dark water. It was regal, imposing, and utterly terrifying. When Giovanni stepped back, Sabrina looked in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back wasn't Sabrina Bennett. Sabrina Bennett begged for attention. This woman commanded submission. Finally, Thorne approached with the necklace. As he fastened the cold weight of the Ethelgard tears around her neck, Sabrina felt the final piece of armor lock into place. The sapphires rested against her skin, glowing with an internal fire. The value of the necklace alone was more than the current market capitalization of Leon's entire company. "The car is ready, Your Grace," Thorne said, his voice thick with emotion. He handed her a small clutch bag. Inside was a single tube of lipstick and her diplomatic passport. Sabrina took a deep breath. She thought about Leon's face when he handed her the divorce papers. She thought about Jenna Vane laughing in the background of his speakerphone calls. "Tell me, Reggie," she said, smoothing the velvet over her hips. "Do I look like a liability now?" Thorne smiled grimly. "No, Mum. You look like the apocalypse." The Metropolitan Museum of Art steps were a frenzy of flashing lights and screaming fans. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ozone from the cameras. It was the night Leon Bennett had been waiting for his entire life. Leon stood at the top of the stairs, posing for the 1,000th photo. He felt like a god. His suit was perfection. His company stock had closed at a record high today, and on his arm was Jenna Vane. Jenna looked stunning in a bright red Valentino gown that was cut down to her navel. It was loud, aggressive, and screamed new money, but Leon loved it. She was vibrant. She was a trophy that the world envied. "They love us," Jenna whispered, squeezing his arm, her smile fixed for the cameras. "Did you see the reporter from Vogue? She practically drooled on my shoes." "We are the moment, Jen," Leon said, his chest swelling. "Forget the past. This is our future. The King and Queen of New York." He briefly thought of Sabrina, probably sitting in that miserable Jersey apartment eating microwave popcorn. A smug satisfaction settled in his gut. He had upgraded. He had won. Suddenly, the atmosphere on the red carpet shifted. The constant hum of the crowd dampened. The synchronized clicking of the cameras stuttered. At the bottom of the stairs, where the limousines dropped off the A-listers, a motorcade had arrived that made everything else look pedestrian. It wasn't just one black car. It was a phalanx. 4 black Range Rovers with diplomatic plates flanked a custom Rolls-Royce Phantom 6, the kind of car usually reserved for heads of state. On the hood flags of the Rolls-Royce, a crest was visible, a silver griffin holding a sapphire shield, the royal crest of Ethelgard. "Who is that?" Jenna asked, her smile faltering slightly. "I didn't approve any diplomatic envoys. Is it the Saudis?" Leon squinted against the lights. "I don't know, but that's serious money." The doors of the Range Rovers opened in unison, and 8 security guards emerged. They were massive men in impeccably tailored suits, wearing earpieces. They didn't look at the cameras, they scanned the crowd for threats. They formed a protective corridor from the door of the Rolls-Royce to the first step of the red carpet. The crowd went silent. Even the jaded paparazzi lowered their cameras, sensing something different. The rear door of the Rolls-Royce opened. First, a single, perfect velvet shoe touched the red carpet. Then, Sabrina stepped out. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. It wasn't just the dress, though the midnight blue velvet seemed to silence the vibrant colors around it. It wasn't just the diamonds and sapphires at her throat, which caught the flashbulbs and sent shards of blue light across the faces of the onlookers. It was the way she held herself, the spine of steel, the chin held high, eyes sweeping over the crowd with an air of absolute, ancient authority. For 10 seconds, no one took a picture. They just stared. "My God," someone near Leon whispered. Is that Sabrina?" Leon heard the name, but his brain refused to process it. He looked down the stairs at this vision of power and wealth. He recognized the nose, the curve of the jaw, but it was impossible. This woman was a titan. His Sabrina was a mouse. Then she looked up. Her blue eyes locked onto his across 50 feet of red carpet. The look wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was dismissive. It was the look a boot gives an ant. Jenna grabbed Leon's arm, her nails digging in. "Leon, who is that Borkia? Why is she wearing the Ethelgard tears? Those belong to the royal vault in Europe. They're priceless." Jenna, having studied art history in Paris, recognized the jewelry before she recognized the woman. I don't know," Leon stammered. His throat felt dry. The confident titan began to shrink. The spell broke. The paparazzi erupted. It was a frenzy 10 times louder than before. "Look here, Your Highness! To the left! Who are you wearing?" Sabrina didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply began to walk up the stairs, her security detail moving with her like a synchronized machine. Jenna, panicking at having her spotlight stolen, signaled fiercely to the head of Met Security, a large man named Brutus who was standing near the entrance. "Stop her!" Jenna hissed. "She's not on the list. Get her out of here." Brutus stepped forward, blocking the path at the top of the stairs, just as Sabrina reached the final step. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," Brutus said, imposing physically but nervously, eyeing her security detail. "This is a private event. I need to see your invitation." Sabrina didn't stop walking. She didn't even look at him. Before Brutus could move, the lead guard of Sabrina's detail, the ex-SAS soldier, stepped in front of him. The movement was so fast it was a blur. He didn't touch Brutus, but the sheer menace in his stance made the big security guard freeze. The soldier's voice was loud, crisp, and carried over the noise of the cameras, ensuring everyone, including Leon and Jenna standing 5 feet away, heard every word. "Step aside," the soldier commanded. "Make way for Her Royal Highness, the Lady Seraphina Caldwell-Sterling, Grand Duchess of Ethelgard." Leon felt the blood drain from his face. The champagne glass slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the red carpet. The Temple of Dendur inside the Metropolitan Museum was bathed in amber light, transformed into a dining hall fit for Olympus. But the atmosphere was brittle. The air crackled with the kind of tension that usually precedes a declaration of war. Sabrina sat at the center table, Table 1. It was the table usually reserved for the Vogue editors and European royalty. Tonight she sat there alone, save for Reginald Thorne on her right and the CEO of the LVMH group on her left, who was currently listening intently as Sabrina discussed the nuances of vineyard management in French. 3 tables away, at table 14, a respectable but decidedly second-tier placement, Leon Bennett stared at his ex-wife. He hadn't touched his lobster thermidor. "It's a stunt," Jenna hissed, stabbing her fork into a potato. Her face was flushed, her earlier triumph on the red carpet turned to ash. "She hired actors, Leon." "Grand Duchess? Please. She's from Queens. She used to clip coupons for toothpaste. It's pathetic." Marcus Vane, Jenna's father and the oil tycoon Leon desperately needed to impress, didn't look so sure. He was a shark, and sharks recognize other predators. He was watching Sabrina with narrowed eyes. "That necklace is real, Jenna," Marcus rumbled, his voice gravelly. "I know stones. That center sapphire is the Eye of Ethelgard. It was insured by Lloyd's of London for $80 million last week. I saw the memo." He turned his cold gaze to Leon. "You told me your wife was a nobody. You said she was a drain on your resources." Leon loosened his tie, sweat prickling his collar. "She is, Marcus. I swear. I don't know how she got that jewelry. Maybe she stole it. Maybe she's sleeping with some old aristocrat. It's a facade." "Fix it," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Because right now, the investors I brought to meet you, the ones supposed to buy your IPO shares, are all lining up to kiss her ring. If she is who they say she is, and you divorced her to marry my daughter, you look like the biggest idiot in financial history, and I don't do business with idiots." Leon stood up. Panic was clawing at his throat, but arrogance was a hard habit to break. He convinced himself Jenna was right. It had to be a trick. Sabrina was soft. Sabrina was weak. He could bully the truth out of her. He marched across the room. The conversation at the nearby tables died down as people watched Leon Bennett approach the royal table. Sabrina didn't look up as he arrived. She was sipping her champagne, a vintage that wasn't on the menu for the other guests. "Sabrina," Leon said, his voice loud, trying to project authority. She slowly set the glass down. She turned her head, her expression one of mild curiosity, as if looking at a waiter who had brought the wrong order. "Mr. Bennett, I believe this area is restricted." "Cut the act," Leon snapped, leaning in, his hands gripping the back of her chair. "Who paid for this? Who put you up to this? Is it a competitor? Are you trying to tank my stock price?" Reginald Thorne began to stand, but Sabrina silenced him with a tiny gesture of her hand. "You think this is about you?" Sabrina asked, her voice calm, but carrying a chill that lowered the temperature of the room. "You are remarkably self-absorbed, Leon, even for a narcissist." "You're a fraud," Leon hissed. "You're Sabrina Bennett. You lived in my apartment. You cooked my meals. You're not a duchess." Sabrina stood up then. In heels, she was nearly eye-level with him. The velvet dress rippled like armor. "I cooked your meals because I loved you," she said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I lived in your apartment because I wanted a life where my title didn't define me. I wanted to see if a man could love me, not the sterling fortune." She leaned in close, her eyes boring into his. "And you failed that test, Leon. Spectacularly." "I made you!" Leon shouted, losing control. "I'm the genius here. You were nothing." "You were a coder with a stolen algorithm," Sabrina replied smoothly. And who do you think co-signed the loans that built Nexus Dynamics? You think the bank gave $5 million to a college dropout with no credit history? She laughed, a dark, elegant sound. They gave it to you because my name was on the guarantor line, hidden in the blind trust you never bothered to read. Leon froze. The blood drained from his face. What? I own your debt, Leon, Sabrina whispered. I've always owned it, and I was happy to let you play CAO, until you decided to humiliate me. Before Leon could respond, Jenna appeared at his side, trembling with rage. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Leon losing. She grabbed a glass of red wine from a passing waiter's tray. Get away from my fiancé, you fake boof! Jenna shrieked. She threw the wine. It happened in slow motion. The dark red liquid arced through the air towards Sabrina's priceless cream-colored sash. But it never landed. The ex-SAS bodyguard moved with supernatural speed, stepping in front of Sabrina. The wine splashed harmlessly against his black Kevlar-lined tuxedo jacket. The room went dead silent. The music stopped. Sabrina looked at the bodyguard, then at Jenna, who was now hyperventilating, realizing she had just assaulted a member of a royal entourage. Reginald, Sabrina said, her voice cutting through the silence like a whip. I believe we are done with dinner. It seems the company here is unrefined. She turned to Leon, who was staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. Enjoy the speeches, Leon, she said. I hear the keynote is going to be full of surprises. The gala of the century had turned into a public execution, though the victim didn't know he was dead yet. After the dinner disaster, Leon had been dragged into a side room by Marcus Vane. The oil tycoon was furious. He had threatened to pull his funding for the IPO unless Leon went out on that stage during the keynote speech and clarified the situation. You go out there, Marcus had growled, and you tell the world that woman is a mentally unstable ex-wife obsessed with you. You deny everything. You claim she's a fraud. If you don't, the market will think you lost the sterling fortune, and your stock will tank before the bell rings tomorrow. Destroy her credibility, Leon, or I destroy you. Now Leon stood at the podium. The microphone was cold in his sweating hand. The spotlight blinded him, hiding the audience in darkness, but he knew they were there. The New York elite, the press, and Sabrina. He took a deep breath. He had to do this. It was survival. Ladies and gentlemen, Leon began, his voice shaking slightly before finding its usual salesman rhythm. Thank you for coming. Tonight is about the future. Nexus Dynamics is about looking forward, not backward. He paused. He looked toward table 14, where Jenna gave him a frantic thumbs up. Unfortunately, Leon continued, his voice hardening, there has been a distraction tonight, a performance. My ex-wife, Sabrina. A murmur went through the crowd. Sabrina has always had a vivid imagination, Leon lied, the words tasting like acid. It saddens me that she has chosen this night, the most important night of my life, to stage a theatrical stunt. The costumes, the hired security. It's a cry for help. He gained confidence. He was good at spinning narratives. The truth is, I left Sabrina because our paths diverged. I needed a partner who lives in reality. I am proud to be standing here, engaged to Jenna Vane, a woman of substance, a woman of real status. He gripped the podium. So let me be clear. I owe nothing to the past. I built this company alone. I am the sole architect of my success, and I formally, publicly reject the delusions of my ex-wife. She is not royalty. She is history. There was a smattering of applause, mostly from Jenna and a few sycophants, but mostly there was a strange, heavy silence. Then a slow, rhythmic clapping began. Clap, clap, clap. It came from table 1. Sabrina stood up. The spotlight operator, sensing the drama, swung the beam from Leon to her. She looked radiant, terrifying, and amused. Beside her, Reginald Thorne stood up. He held a document in his hand, a scroll of parchment with a heavy wax seal. "Mr. Bennet," Reginald's voice boomed without a microphone, trained in the halls of British courts. "Thank you for that clarification. Under the Royal Charter of 1702, specifically Section 4, Paragraph B regarding morganatic marriages and the renunciation of rights, your statement is legally binding." Leon squinted. "What are you talking about? Sit down." Reginald ignored him. He walked toward the stage, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He climbed the stairs and placed the scroll on the podium next to Leon's water glass. "By publicly claiming sole credit for your enterprise, and by explicitly denying the contribution and status of Her Grace, Lady Seraphina, you have triggered the clawback clause of the initial investment trust." Reginald turned to the microphone. Leon tried to grab it, but the bodyguard appeared from the shadows and gently but firmly moved him aside. 5 years ago, Reginald addressed the room. Nexus Dynamics was founded with seed capital from the Sterling Sovereign Fund. The collateral for that loan was not Mr. Bennet's intellectual property, which was deemed speculative, but the personal guarantee of his wife, Lady Seraphina. Reginald gestured to the scroll. The terms were simple. As long as the marriage remained valid, the loan was interest-free and the patent rights were shared. However, Reginald looked at Leon with pity. In the event of a divorce where the spouse is publicly slandered or the debt is denied, the loan is called in immediately, in full, with penalties. A gasp went through the room. "How much?" someone shouted from the back. $300 million, Reginald said calmly. "Payable immediately, or default leads to the immediate seizure of all assets, including the intellectual property, the patents, and the brand." Leon grabbed the podium, his knees buckling. You can't do this. I'm going public tomorrow." Sabrina walked to the bottom of the stage. She looked up at him, her face bathed in light. "You aren't going public, Leon," she said softly, but the microphone picked it up. "You're going bankrupt." She turned to the crowd, addressing the investors. "As of this moment, the Sterling Trust is exercising its right to seize Nexus Dynamics due to breach of contract. The IPO is cancelled." She looked at Marcus Vane. "Mr. Vane, I suggest you check your daughter's pockets. I believe she's wearing a diamond ring bought with company funds. Technically that belongs to me now, too." Marcus Vane turned purple. He looked at Leon with pure hatred. "You lied to me," Marcus roared, standing up and knocking his chair over. "You told me you owned the tech." "I do. I wrote the code," Leon screamed, looking from Marcus to Sabrina. "Sabrina, please, stop this. It's just a misunderstanding." "No, Leon," Sabrina said, turning her back on him. "It's a revolution." She signaled to her guards. "Reginald, seize the assets. I want the servers secured within the hour, and have the car brought around. I'm bored." As Sabrina began to walk away, Leon scrambled down the stairs, desperate to stop her. He reached out to grab her arm. "Sabrina, wait! We can talk! I still love you!" It was the fatal mistake. The moment his hand touched the velvet of her dress, the SAS bodyguard didn't just block him. He acted. With a fluid motion, he swept Leon's legs out from under him and pinned him to the red carpet, face pressed into the floor. "Assault on a royal personage," the guard announced. "Police!" Camera flashes exploded like strobe lights. The image of Leon Bennett, tech genius, billionaire titan, pinned to the floor like a common criminal, while his poor ex-wife walked away without looking back, was captured forever. Sabrina stopped at the exit. She turned one last time, looking not at Leon, but at Jenna, who was sobbing into her hands. "You wanted the title of Mrs. Bennet, Jenna?" Sabrina called out. "You can have it, and the debts that come with it." The fall of Leon Bennet didn't happen in a single moment. It was a slow, agonizing disintegration, like a skyscraper collapsing floor by floor in slow motion. 3 weeks had passed since the catastrophe at the Met Gala. 3 weeks of silence from phones that used to ring non-stop. 3 weeks of watching his bank accounts freeze, one by one, until his credit cards were declined at a coffee shop. Leon sat in the waiting room of the district attorney's office, staring at a stain on the beige carpet. He wasn't in the penthouse anymore. He wasn't even in the guest house. He was currently sleeping on a pull-out couch in his assistant's studio apartment, an assistant who had resigned yesterday because Leon couldn't make payroll. He wore a suit, but it wasn't one of his Italian customs. Those had been seized by the forensic accountants 3 days ago as liquidatable assets. This was an off-the-rack grey suit he had bought at a department store an hour ago, using the last few $100s of cash he had hidden in a shoebox. It was tight in the shoulders and loose in the waist, making him look diminished, like a boy wearing his father's clothes. "Mr. Bennet?" A young, tired-looking clerk opened the heavy oak door. "They're ready for you." Leon stood up, smoothing his tie. He tried to summon the swagger of the CEO, who had graced the cover of Forbes. He tried to channel the man who had told the world he was a visionary, but the swagger wouldn't come. All that was left was a trembling in his hands that he couldn't stop. He walked into the deposition room. It was a cold, sterile space with fluorescent lights that hummed like a dying insect. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Reginald Thorne. The royal solicitor looked maddeningly fresh. He wore a 3-piece suit of navy pinstripe, a silk tie, and a pocket square folded with geometric precision. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like the executioner who apologized before swinging the axe. Next to Thorne sat a woman Leon didn't recognize, a severe-looking American attorney with a stack of files in front of her. But it was the empty chair at the far end of the table that drew Leon's eye. "Sit down, Mr. Bennet," Thorne said, his voice polite but devoid of warmth. Leon sank into the chair. "Where is my lawyer?" "Your court-appointed counsel is running late," Thorne said, checking his gold pocket watch. "However, this is not a criminal proceeding yet. This is a settlement conference regarding the assets of the Sterling Trust. We can begin." "I want to talk to Sabrina," Leon said, his voice raspy. "I know she's behind this. Tell her I'm ready to negotiate. I'll give her the patent rights for the European market. I'll give her 10% of the company back." Thorne exchanged a look with the American attorney, a look of amusement. "Mr. Bennet," Thorne said softly, "you seem to be laboring under a significant delusion. You have nothing to give. You own nothing." Thorne signaled to the attorney, who slid a thick binder across the table. "This is the forensic audit of Nexus Dynamics," Thorne explained. "It is illuminating. It appears that for the last 2 years, you have been funding your lifestyle by diverting capital from the R&D budget. The penthouse for Ms. Vane, listed as Server Farm Lease B. The diamond bracelet you gave her for Christmas, prototype material acquisition." Leon felt the blood drain from his face. That was creative accounting. Everyone does it. It's a start-up. We move money around." "It is embezzlement," Thorne corrected. "Grand larceny, given the amounts, and fraud against your primary investor, the trust." "Jenna will vouch for me," Leon blurted out. "She knows it was for the business. She's the head of PR. She authorized the expenses." Thorne stopped shuffling papers. He looked at Leon with genuine pity. "Mr. Bennet, have you not seen the news this morning?" Thorne tapped a button on the remote control on the table. A flat-screen TV mounted on the wall flickered to life. It was tuned to CNN. The headline on the crawler read, "Vain heiress turned state's witness." On the screen, Jenna Vane was walking out of a federal building, surrounded by lawyers. She looked shaken, wearing no makeup, dressed conservatively. A reporter shoved a microphone in her face. "Ms. Vane, did you know about the fraud at Nexus?" Jenna looked straight into the camera. Her voice was tearful, rehearsed, and devastating. "I was a victim. Leon Bennett manipulated me. He controlled everything. I had no idea the money was stolen from his wife's charity trust. I am cooperating fully with the authorities to ensure justice is served." The screen went black. Leon sat in stunned silence. The betrayal cut deeper than the bankruptcy. Jenna, the woman he had destroyed his marriage for, the woman he thought was his equal, had thrown him to the wolves to save her own skin. "She's lying," Leon whispered. "She demanded that apartment. She picked out the yacht." "Irrelevant," Thorne said, closing the file. "She has the Vane family lawyers. You have a court-appointed attorney who is currently stuck in traffic. The narrative is set, Mr. Bennett. You are the villain." The door opened again. The air in the room seemed to shift, the pressure dropping. Sabrina walked in. She didn't slam the door. She didn't stomp. She moved with the silent, terrifying grace of a predator entering a clearing. She wasn't wearing the velvet gown from the gala. She was wearing a white power suit, sharp, tailored, immaculate. Her hair was loose, falling in soft waves around a face that looked 5 years younger than the tired woman Leon remembered. She held a takeaway coffee cup in one hand and an iPhone in the other. She looked busy. She looked important. She looked happy. Leon stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Sabrina." She didn't look at him. She walked to the window, looking out at the skyline where his name had once been projected in lights. "Your Grace," Thorne said, standing respectfully. "We were just reviewing the audit." "I heard," Sabrina said. Her voice was different. The tentative, soft-spoken wobble was gone. In its place was a cool, resonant alto, the voice of someone who gave orders and expected them to be followed. She turned to Leon. She didn't smile. Her eyes were clear, blue, and utterly indifferent. "Sit down, Leon," she said. He sat. He felt like a schoolboy in the principal's office. "Sabrina, please," he began, the desperation leaking out of him. "You have to stop this. Jenna is lying. Marcus is trying to ruin me. I know I hurt you. I know I was an idiot. But you can't let them put me in prison. I'm the father of your... We built this together." "We did build it together," Sabrina said, walking slowly toward the table. "That's the part that hurts you, isn't it? Knowing that you didn't do it alone." She placed her coffee cup on the table. "I had my engineers look at the source code for the Nexus algorithm yesterday," she said casually. "The code you claimed was your magnum opus." "It is," Leon defended. "I wrote the core kernel in our basement." "You wrote a kernel that crashed every 4 hours," Sabrina corrected. "Do you remember those nights you fell asleep at the keyboard? Exhausted. And you'd wake up the next morning and miraculously the bugs were fixed. You told me you must have coded in your sleep." Leon froze. He remembered. He remembered waking up feeling like a genius, the code flowing perfectly. "That was me," Sabrina said. "I learned Python and C++ in my first year at Oxford, Leon. While you were sleeping, I was debugging. While you were practicing your pitch speeches in the mirror, I was optimizing the back end so the demo wouldn't crash." Leon stared at her, his mouth opening and closing. "You? But you were knitting. You were cooking." "I can do 2 things," Sabrina said dryly. "The point is, Leon, The intellectual property isn't yours. It never was. You were the face. I was the brain. And frankly, the face has become a liability. She signaled to Thorn. We are dissolving Nexus Dynamics, Sabrina announced. What? Leon gasped. No, you can't. It's worth billions. The brand is toxic, Sabrina said, associated with fraud and a disgraced CIO. So we are stripping it for parts. The patents are being transferred to the Sterling Sovereign Fund. The remaining assets, the servers, the real estate, your office furniture, are being liquidated. To pay the debt? To fund the new venture, Sabrina said. She slid a glossy brochure across the table. The Sabrina Sterling Initiative, empowering women in tech. I'm using your company to fund grants for female coders, Sabrina said, a spark of satisfaction finally lighting her eyes. Every dollar you stole, every dollar you wasted on Italian suits and champagne is going to help a woman who is actually doing the work. I think it's poetic. Leon put his head in his hands. It was total erasure. His name, his company, his legacy, all gone, replaced by the wife he had called poor. Why are you here, Sabrina? Leon whispered, looking up, tears streaming down his face. Did you come to watch me bleed? Is this your revenge? Are you going to send me to prison? Sabrina looked at him for a long moment. She looked at the cheap suit. She looked at the terror in his eyes. She waited for the satisfaction to hit her, the rush of victory. But she felt nothing. He was just a small, sad man who had mistaken luck for talent. No, Sabrina said. I'm not sending you to prison. Leon blinked. You're not? Thorn wanted to, she admitted, glancing at the solicitor who looked disappointed. He has the evidence to put you away for 10 years, but I'm dropping the criminal complaint regarding the trust's funds. Why? Leon asked, hope surging in his chest. Because you still love me? Sabrina laughed. It was a genuine laugh, bright and incredulous. No, Leon, I'm dropping it because I'm busy. She checked her watch. I have a flight to Ethelgard in 2 hours. My father is abdicating. I am to be crowned Duchess Regent next week. A criminal trial would require me to stay in New York for depositions. It would require me to think about you, to talk about you, and quite frankly, I don't have the time. She leaned in, her hands resting on the table. Prison would make you a martyr, Leon. It would give you a story. The fallen genius. People would write books about you. I don't want that. Then what do you want? I want you to be ordinary, she said. The word hung in the air like a curse. I want you to walk out of here with no money, no company, and no reputation. I want you to apply for jobs and be rejected. I want you to ride the subway. I want you to be exactly what you were when I found you. Just a man with an ego bigger than his bank account. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. She placed it on the table. It was the plastic ring, the cheap, tarnished band he had bought her. You can have this back, she said. It's the only thing in this entire city that truly belongs to you. Sabrina turned and walked toward the door. Sabrina! Leon called out, panic rising as he realized this was truly the end. What will I do? Where will I go? She stopped, hand on the doorknob. She looked back one last time. I hear they're hiring coders at the DMV, Leon. It's entry-level, but you have to start somewhere. She opened the door. Outside, in the hallway, a man was waiting. He wasn't a bodyguard. He was tall, with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair, wearing a tweed jacket. He looked like a professor, or perhaps a doctor. Ready to go? The man asked, his voice warm. Ready, Sabrina said, her face lighting up with a softness Leon hadn't seen in years. Who is that? Leon asked, his voice trembling. Sabrina looked at the man, then back at Leon. That's Dr. Oris Thorne, Chief of Neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. And unlike you, Leon, he doesn't need my title to feel important. He saves lives. You just ruined yours. She took the doctor's hand. Goodbye, Leon. The door clicked shut. Reginald Thorne stood up, snapping his briefcase shut. I believe we are done here, Mr. Bennett. Security will escort you out. Please leave the building pass at the front desk. Leon stood on the sidewalk outside the district attorney's office. It was raining. A cold, grey New York drizzle that soaked through his cheap suit in seconds. He looked down at his hand. He was holding the plastic ring. Passers-by bumped into him, rushing to get out of the rain. No one recognized him. No cameras flashed. There were no paparazzi. They had all left to follow Sabrina's motorcade to the airport. He was invisible. He walked to the curb, raising his hand to hail a taxi. A yellow cab slowed down, the driver looking at him. But then, a man in a sharp suit pushed past Leon, opened the door, and hopped in. "Hey!" Leon shouted. "I was first! Do you know who I am?" The man in the cab rolled down the window. He looked Leon up and down. The wet hair, the ill-fitting suit, the desperation. "Yeah, pal?" the stranger sneered. "You're nobody." The cab sped off, splashing muddy water onto Leon's shoes. Leon stood there, shivering. He looked at the plastic ring one last time. He thought about throwing it into the gutter. But he didn't. He put it in his pocket. It was all he had left. He turned and began to walk toward the subway entrance. The sign above the stairs read, "Downtown." It was a long way down. And that is the story of how Leon Bennett learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never judge a book or a wife by the cover. He thought he was discarding a poor woman, but he ended up throwing away a literal fortune. Sabrina didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She proved that true class isn't about what you wear or how much money you shout about. It's about who you are when the lights go out. If you enjoyed this story of royal revenge and sweet justice, please destroy that like button. It helps the channel so much. And I want to know from you in the comments, if you were Sabrina, would you have spared Leon from jail, or would you have let him rot? Let me know your thoughts down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload brand new drama every single day. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.